Checkity, check. All right.
Wishing he was someone else because the posters on the wall, they don't look like a him at all. So he ties it up, he tucks it in, he pulls it back and gives a grin, laughing at himself because he knows he ain't loved it all. He gets his courage from the can and makes him feel like a man because he's loving all the ladies, but the ladies don't love him at all. He's not drunk, he's only stuck on himself, and then he has the nerve to say he needs a decent girl. Looking at herself but wishing she was someone else because the body of the dollar don't look like hers at all. So she straps it on, she sets it in, she throws it up, but gives a grin, laughing at herself because she knows she ain't that at all. Caught up in the trends where the truth began to bend, and the next thing you know, man, there just ain't no truth left at all. Cause when the pretty girl walks, she walks so proud, and when the pretty girl laughs, oh man, she laughs so loud.
Say in your mind, say to yourself, I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. I deeply desire to expand, to experience, to know, to understand, to control, to use such greater energies and energy systems as may be beneficial and constructive to me and to those who follow me. I deeply desire the help and cooperation, the assistance, the understanding of those individuals whose wisdom, development, and experience are equal to or greater than my own. I ask their guidance and protection from any influence or any source that might provide me with less than my stated desires.
Do not know all the answers to the questions about reality. Do not claim to know the ultimate truth about fire. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family and explorers of consciousness. I am the void one.
Welcome to Lighting the Void.
Broadcasting live from a shack on a hill in the Mossy Creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void live. It is Lighting the Void radio. How about that? It's Lighting the Void live Tuesday night, April the 16th. And we're going to get into two subjects. I'm going to let you choose. Why not? Appreciate your patience. We weren't here last night. I had to drive around into the moonlit hours of about 1 a.m. last night trying to recover. Man, you know, you could do I'm not going to get into it tonight, but you could definitely do a whole series of, I guess, Uber driving, DoorDash, and Instacart, Grubhub, whatever, like, This is an adventure in itself. I mean, I'm sure there's podcasts about it, but last night was rough. So tonight, I want to get into two things. So I'm going to let you choose. I have both of these pulled up. Now, this does have to do with out-of-body experience. And by the way, Wolf, I watched what you put in the Discord. That guy, Temple, I think, who was talking about his out-of-body experiences. And I noticed that Dan and a couple other people were talking about how they weren't real sure if this guy was legit or not. So I'm going to see if I can talk to the guy, okay? But the creepiest thing that guy talked about, if you hadn't listened to it, it's in the Discord, was this figure that he talked about in the astral realm, this lady in it creeped me out, this lady in some gray gown that he could never see her face, and she would put her hand on his shoulder and just kind of guide him around. That's freaking creepy, man. That part sounded true. But the plasma orbs and I'm with Dan on this one, and him being a satellite and all this stuff, I don't know. I don't know if that's real or not. So I haven't got through it all. I'm still listening to it. I was kind of listening to it last night while I was door dashing. So we got two choices to pick from tonight. This is both from Dion Fortune. It both has to do with OBEs and your subtle body or your etheric double, I think. And one of them is Sexual Ethics and Occultism from 1940 by Dion Fortune, or The Subtle Bodies. The Subtle Bodies, not body, but The Subtle Bodies. Same thing, Dion Fortune, 1939. So I'm going to let you pick because I jumped on here, man. Just jumped. Which one is it? I know what people want to hear. They want to hear about the sexual thing, but I'm not gonna read it until someone puts it in the chat. You have to have the balls enough to put which one in you want. Carry no shame or whatever. Just don't make me pick. They're both pretty good, right? Because they both talk about, in my opinion, the etheric double. One of them has more to do with the magnetic forces of the energies and stuff. And if you don't think this has to do with OBEs, you're crazy, right? Like you haven't had an out-of-body experience, because if you did, you would know, for the most part, if you can get past the push or that weird feeling that you feel when you get pulled back towards your body, if you've been out enough, there is like these overwhelming sexual force kind of feeling in the astral realm. But no one's going to pick. I know there's a delay, so I'm going to wait. Just keep in mind that both of these are from Dion Fortune. And both of them are around 1939 and 1940, which is my favorite era, by the way. I would love to go back and live during that time. I think things were far more simple back then. Don't you? You know, it's not like today I'm trying to find, I go like on the news every day. I got home a couple hours before the show, and I'm starting to like just scroll through the news. Like, what could I talk about that's news related? And it's the same thing every day. There's 20,000 articles about Trump, and I'm blocking these things. It's not that I don't like Trump. I'm just trying to block all the political stuff on my screen, and then after that, I'm like, okay, well, I blocked all that out. Let me see if I can block all the music stuff out. And then there's nothing left. Like nobody cares about anything else besides politics nowadays, you know? All right, so Tsudi says she doesn't care about hearing the sexual stuff. April says, I missed what we're picking from. So we're picking, you still have to pick one. All right, so sexual ethics and occultism. I think that's pretty interesting. Tsudi doesn't. And then the second one is the subtle bodies. Keep in mind, Dion Fortune was a very, and still is today, a very well respected occultist, and I would say OBE traveler as well. So it doesn't bother me either way. So what do you think? What's up, MJ? Because of the sexual drive with shape-shifting or out of body, it becomes addictive. Really? I might have to pull the phone lines up for that one. The sexual drive with shape-shifting. Dude, you might have to call in and talk about that. What are you talking about, man? Here, let me get the phones up. Just in case. You know. I've never I'm not real sure what you mean by shape-shifting. If I'm missing something, God, please tell me. All right, let's see. Carlos says, sexual ethics, please. Stare down with the dog. Dog is gone. After that last stare down, the dog is gone. All right. So somebody picked one. Someone had the balls to pick one. So that's what we're going to do. We'll start off with that. We might get into both. But this is from 1940 in Circuits of Force by Dion Fortune. And it's a touchy subject because this is, in my opinion, this isn't talked about enough when it comes to occultism. So Dion Fortune goes on to say, it is impossible to deal with the subject of magnetic force without relating it to the question of sexual ethics. Sexual ethics for 100, please. The basic magnetic force, the energy that manifests in the Muladhara lotus, turns into sex force at its first transmutation. And it is no use blinking this fact. It is equally true, however, that its next transmutation is into the golden solar force of Tiferet. So at first, it turns into sexual energy and then transforms into something else. All right. So beyond this comes the higher magnetic aspects, which she says it's not real important because we're going to talk about this. So in considering the question of the transmutation of force from Malkuth, the earth, to Yesod, which is the moon sexual center in occultism, and in the OBE stuff, it's the same thing. I promise you. They just don't have names for it in the OBE world. They feel it and they go through it. It's in all the books. They just don't have names for it, really. So from the moon to the sun, from the moon sex center, from Yesod to Tiferet, the moon to the sun. So we shall inevitably deal with the force in accordance with our sexual ethics. Of these, there are two types, the aesthetic and the pagan. That doesn't make sense to me right off the bat. It will be observed, firstly, that I do not contrast the terms Christian and pagan because the ascetic ideal is not solely Christian. So Zoroastrianism and Buddhism are both ascetic faiths. Am I saying that right? And there are ascetic sects in Hinduism and Mohammedanism. She says Mohammedanism. It would also be observed that I use the ill-reputed word pagan to represent the contrasting viewpoint to the ascetic. Because the true meaning of the word refers to nature worship. All right, that's usually like pagan or pantheism, and means one who remains faithful to the old gods. So unless we can rise above the blinding influence of racial custom and personal habit and seek truth at its source, we shall move in circles, arriving nowhere. Can you imagine the balls on this woman having to write about this, put it out, woman, in 1940? I think it's awesome. Probably got a lot of pushback here. So we are all too apt to start with certain premises concerning good and evil, right and wrong, moral and immoral, and entirely fail to realize that these as we know them were not handed over by God to man, engraved on tablets of stone. They have been formulated out of a mixed mass of superstition and practical experience. In some things, practical experience is given a hearing. In others, all is swamped in a morass of superstition. We see this plainly when we observe the social customs of people with all cultures that differ so widely from our own that we are free from all association of ideas and judging them. But we are unable to see the irrationality in our own social codes, nor the influences that sheer superstition that exerts over us. Our sexual ethics are profoundly influenced by two things. First, by certain primitive concepts concerning, quote, magical influences associated with sexual forces, and beliefs which are pure folklore and superstition and are but a debased and ignorant echo of the true esoteric teaching on this all-important subject. Think about, and also, too, when she talks about these different spheres, if you listen to this show and you haven't read Journeys Out of the Body or all of the stuff that Monroe's been through, William Gilman's been through, I mean, I could go on with the names, Thomas Campbell, you're going to find so many parallels in this. It's insane, all right? All right. Secondly, the old laws concerning the inheritance of property, laws that came to an end in England with the passing of the Married Woman's Property Act. Anybody know about that? Look into that. So these two influences have played a far greater part than we realize in the molding of our ideas on the subject of sexual morality. Finally, we have to consider the third point, that the apex of the ethical triangle, the view that the flesh warreth against the spirit and the spirit against the flesh. This is a thing that I heard in church when I was a kid. I don't know how many of you guys went to Baptist churches, but I did. I grew up in a Baptist church, and that was one of the biggest things that they would say, that the flesh is evil, pretty much, and it's like a war between spirit and flesh. So, so this is a plain spoken statement of an aesthetic viewpoint. So if this viewpoint were taken seriously in all its implications, we should settle the conflict promptly and permanently by the only effectual method, suicide. That's a joke, but we do not do this, for those saints have dealt with the flesh in such manner, then they were reported to look like roots of trees. Most illogically, aesthetics stop short at suicide and propound a code of compromise. All right. So it is, of course, true that if the flesh is allowed to get out of hand, it will not only war against the spirit, but against its own existence by overindulgence. We've all experienced this, too. And this is also seen, too, when you... So if you have an addiction to something, energetically, it doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't even have to be sex. But if you have an addiction to something, you will take that into the astral realm. There is no doubt about it. You already take it into your dream world. It's used. You can see it in symbolism and stuff, but it will show itself in the I guess you could say the OBE realm. It's an odd fact that saints live longer than rakes. I like her sense of humor. In asceticism of self-discipline, there must be, if the flesh is to be kept in working order and the body rendered a tolerable habitation. But that man should take it into his head to remake God's handiwork according to his own ideas is not only blasphemous, but impractical. The ascetic methods do not solve the sex problem. They merely disorganize the sex life, and the distorted forces appear in all manner of pathological forms. And you don't have to study too many books in psychology to see the truth in that either. Not occultism or magic or woo-woo, just basic psychology. So it is not possible to adventure into the deeper issues of occultism unless one is prepared to recognize that conventional ethics are blind leaders to the blind. You guys see that video that I put out? Like if you follow me on Facebook, this guy that he started... It's kind of funny. He put a goat in front of a bunch of goats. He lit a bonfire. And you know how goats just kind of follow the leader kind of thing. And eventually they just started going in a circle. So he followed them around the circle till they all kept running, and the one's following the other. And then he kind of stepped outside the circle and they're just running in a circle thinking they're getting somewhere. Kind of what she's talking about. So blind leading the blind to say. So to say this is not to abrogate ethics, but to face the fact that conventional ethics need an overhaul. This is 1942, all right? So don't shoot the messenger here. Anybody who regards sex as evil or is in any way afraid of it or self-conscious about it had better leave occultism alone. And I would say this too. You know, I will warn you off occultism. So the OBE experience, same thing. Like if you think sex is evil, if you're afraid of it or you're self-conscious about it, in the OBE experience, it's not going to be like devastating, right? It's not the same as messing with occultism, but it will show up and it will make things hard or awkward. Like I haven't read any books and I don't know anybody personally that's afraid of it anyways, but I think it's cool how like Robert Monroe dealt with it. Because at first when he started, it took him a while to get outside his house, his neighborhood, then eventually start going to different planes, okay? And when he got to these different planes, then he started getting a ton of, I guess you could say, feminine entities, energies, spirits. Maybe they were women. Who knows? I don't know. He doesn't really elaborate on that. But they were always trying to meld with him and stuff. And he, he did it. Sometimes he didn't. But eventually he learned how to get past it. But he dealt with it like... Even in the 60s and 70s, this guy, I think he dealt with it in a healthy way. But she's saying, if you look at it as evil, or if you're afraid of it or self-conscious about it, you better leave occultism alone. For it is only through a perfectly naturalistic attitude towards the giving of life that life force can be handled. Let it never be forgotten that there is no such thing as sex force per se, but that it is simply the life force on a different level, on a particular level. And that through this level, the force must pass every time it rises and descends on the planes. So it's a part of the life force. It's not really like, according to what she's saying, like this, it's the sex force kind of thing, But this does not mean that every magical act must culminate in orgasm. Of course, there are people that think that in magic. They're like, oh, well, I'm not going to manifest anything unless I have an orgasm. And that's a whole other topic. But if you're into manifesting things, I don't know why you would practice magic to begin with. So far from it, though. Orgasm is the earthing of the force. It's exponential like a flash of lightning. So there's no force available for magic immediately after orgasm. And in magic, rightly worked, there will be no force available for orgasm either, if all is restored to balance as it should be at the end of the operation. A magical rite properly worked leaves the operators in the same harmonized state that follows coitus, and magic can be used as a most effectual and satisfying form of sublimation, not because it deteriorates into orgies, but because it rises on the planes. There are rituals, though, in black magic, in which the sexual forces are deliberately stimulated through the imagination, and she's calling this black magic in the 40s. There are exponents of unnatural methods whose names are well known in occult circles. She's talking about Crowley here. And also, it may be said to the police. The police? That's weird. The information I have gathered is, I am afraid, much too startling for publication in these pages. Ooh. Damn it, Dion. You should have wrote about it. Don't tease us, man. So she goes on to say, because I lay the facts of sex in relation to occultism frankly before my readers, it must not be thought that I advocate these practices. Black magic takes place when a knowledge of the magnetic force is deliberately exploited in an unnatural manner. It is exceedingly necessary that anyone who is making a serious study of yoga and magnetic forces, especially if practical experimentation is included in their research, and it is hardly worthy to be considered serious if it is not, should have a thorough understanding of the relationship between magnetism and sex. Is this making anybody feel weird yet? I think it's good that she talks about it like this, because most of the stuff that I hear when people talk about this subject is complete. It's not complete, but it's a lot of horseshit, to be honest with you. Sudi, you're okay. What's up, Domek? What's up, brother? All right, so she goes on to say, in order to perform practical occult work, it's necessary to have magnetic force in strong concentration and under perfect control. And the raw material out of which the higher magnetic forces are sublimated is sexual energy. So we got that, hopefully. So it is for this reason that only persons of vital and dynamic temperament can work magic. But it is equally true that only persons whose sex life, though vigorous, is perfectly controlled and harmonized can work magic for long without going all to pieces. There are many ways of harmonizing the sex life in addition to the crude methods of repression and promiscuity. See, repression would be like one way out of balance method, and then promiscuity is a whole other. It's like the swinging of the pendulum. So you want to be in the middle here, which are often considered to be only alternatives. So if the appetite for food were indulged or denied with the same ignorance and caprice as the appetite for sexual satisfaction, the chronic dyspepsia that resulted would soon produce a C3 nation. Or you could just say it would soon produce what we have now. So we need to get the fact, because this was in the 40s. I wonder, I need to look at the stats too, man, because we're all fat now, most of us. A lot of us are. We need to get at the facts and apply common sense in this matter, and no longer allow our judgment and practice to be directed by clerics who, if the looks of themselves and their wives are anything to go by, are no recommendation for their own theories. Quote, will I get like you if I do as you advise, end quote, is a very pertinent question to put to the official exponents of moral doctrine. And I would say what she's saying right there doesn't have to actually do with sexual ethics and occultism. Anybody that's giving you moral advice, because I don't think moral is subjective, by the way. You just treat people the way you want to be treated. That's pretty objective if you ask me. But anybody that starts to give you moral advice, including her, right, in this thing, you should probably take a look at, well, are they healthy, happy, loved, all this other stuff? Because, I don't know, Will I get like you if I do what you tell me to, if I do what you advise? That's a good question to always ask. So unless we regard sex as sacred, but not an unclean thing, we have no business in the temple of the mysteries. I like that. I'll repeat that. Unless we regard sex as sacred, but not an unclean thing, we have no business in the temple of the mysteries, where the esoteric doctrines of sex and polarity is among the secrets of the higher degrees. There's the secrets to the higher degrees. It's not somebody sacrificing a goat in a massive orgy somewhere. That's it. So it has been my task, at no inconsiderable risk to myself, to give out much of these teachings. I have been attacked by those who would have kept them secret for what motives, save blind adherence to tradition and advantage to personal prestige, I do not know. And I've always said the same thing. Why are you keeping stuff secret? There's only one healthy reason why you could keep something secret, is because maybe it's dangerous to tell somebody something. Other than that, you're just trying to keep shit to yourself because it gives you some kind of status or prestige, or you're trying to make money. Go ahead and reveal the deeper mysteries and let them know to really understand the deeper mysteries. They have to go through the whole process so they can have a deeper understanding, but don't hide it, She goes on to say, in 1940, there's no YouTube in 1940, I have been censored and even calumniated by those whose viewpoints is different from mine. One party says that the teachings, though true and valuable, should be kept secret, and the other ones say that they are untrue and dangerous. Now, to the former, I would say that no one has the right to keep secrets what he knows to be true and valuable, and that the leaves of the tree of knowledge are for the healing of the nations. To the latter, I reply that what is untrue in these matters cannot be dangerous, because if it's untrue, then it's unworkable. So whether it's wicked or not, it's a matter of opinion, and the only appeal can be to experience by the fruits ye shall know them. And if the fruits are of sane mind and a sound body, it is difficult to believe that the tree that bears them is evil. Amen to that, sister. I'll go with that one. Here we go. I'm going to get some hates for this one, though. I'm not saying it, Dion's saying it, but I might agree with it. Maybe. The experiences of choir boys in the field of Christian morality, of which by virtue of their office they have a close-up view, make significant readings. But the records have to be sought in the archives of psychopathology and the police courts. So she's kind of saying, hey, you guys that are teaching all of this, sex is evil, it's unclean, the war of the flesh stuff, yet when I go search the police reports, you guys are diddling with choir boys. That's what she's saying, but she's trying to hide it when she says it. Nature misused takes a terrible revenge. And the last word in these matters is with nature, not moral philosophy. There it is. That's all. See, that wasn't so hard. So what's the biggest takeaway right there, right? Like, sacred but not unclean. Be balanced about it. Be healthy about it. That's it. So then we'll go into the circuit of force, or the subtle bodies. Now, I think that this is something that we experience in OBEs all the time too. For instance, if I get out of body, I have an etheric double that I've experienced that feels like my physical body. It doesn't feel any different. And it's really weird too. It's like when I touch things, or I can even be blind, not be able to see anything, and yet I can still feel things everywhere. Now, we can get into a whole like existential, esoteric argument of like, is that real, or is your mind really making it up? Well, if that's the case, if you want to go that route, then I would say that your mind is making up what's happening right now, because the two experiences are exactly the same. So we can put that to the side, right? Because since they're like, when I tell you guys, if you have an OBE, you can always tell somebody that hasn't, because they'll begin to talk about it like lucid dreams. If you have a real full-fledged, like the peeling out OBE kind of thing, the reality that you're experiencing with your senses that you have now are not much different. In the OBE state, there's like a slight hum, and that's only if you pay attention to it. Okay. So I'm saying all that to say this. That is a subtle body, your etheric double. That's one form of a subtle body. But then there's other states that it can be in, which I haven't had too many experiences with. Like Buellman for sure, tons of occultists, but Buellman for sure, who's not an occultist, he's just an OBE guy, right? He's just concerned about the soul and the spirit, and that's it, has turned into a ball of light. It took him a while, but eventually he let go of his human form and turned into a ball of light. Same thing, I think, for Monroe. You have to get all the way into his third books, but he eventually turned into this thing too, okay? You call it the greater consciousness system, whatever. It really all parallels out to be the same no matter what name you give it. All right, so this is the subtle bodies she wrote about a year before the sexual stuff, right? So this was in 1939 in the Circuit of Force. So the anatomy of the etheric double has been the subject of many treatises and much speculation. Different psychics report different things, and although psychics trained in the same school may agree, the schools disagree among themselves. And that's still going on today too. Broadly speaking, however, all schools agree in describing an ovoid of light surrounding the physical body in the same way as the white surrounds the yolk of an egg. And this is why when you read a lot of occult books and you see things like the Middle Pillar or whatever, especially older like Israel Regardie books, they'll show like an egg-shaped ovoid kind of aura around the body. Less advanced psychics describe the light as gray, silvery, and pale or bright gold according to their power of perception and the type of aura. Highly developed psychics describe a rainbow appearance surrounding the human form. So which is correct? In my opinion, both are correct. the colorless grayish light, is the basic etheric substance increasing in brightness to silver or sparkling white, according to what may quite accurately be described as the voltage. When the golden radiance appears as a higher type of force seems to be manifesting through it, the basic silver-gray cloud, however, persists but is suffused by the brighter radiance of the golden light. Now, these two types of radiance, I think all schools would agree in referring to those factors in manifestation which are represented by, guess what? The lunar, that's like silver grayish, and the solar, the golden. You remember how I was told you guys there's 3 stages to the mysteries, right? Lunar, solar, stars. In the OBE world, it's the same. I believe it to be the same thing, but they don't call it that, right? They call it different levels, like this level or that level, or focus 10, and now we're in focus 20 or whatever. And all of the chaos that's in between it too that makes no sense. It's all in there. The rainbow colors perceived by still more highly developed psychics can, though with less unanimity of agreement, be referred to the various planetary spheres of the manifestations of force. So you could just say that all that stuff's in there. So thus we obtain a working scheme of agreement concerning the anatomy of the subtle body, so variously and variegatedly described. So people like occultists will tend to see this stuff, but then the OBE people like Muldoon, who else? Pretty much all the books we read, they'll see this stuff. They mention things like this, but they're not really talking about it too much because it's not really a big deal. Sometimes, if you listen to some of the travelers that are in the Monroe stuff, they'll talk about these different colors. Sometimes it's just color. Like Thomas Campbell, when he was talking about, man, I see all these shapes and colors and stuff. I know our brains want to categorize everything and think of things in levels because that's the way our brain works. But consciousness works in a very funny, chaotic way, I think, that has nothing to do with what our brain wants to do. But according to Dion Fortune, like if you're doing this kind of work and you're doing it on purpose, you might be able to see all this stuff better. And I know a few people that I actually believe, I believe personally, that can see these things. I've had so many people tell me they can see auras, but then you just kind of watch them, right? And you can tell they're bullshitting a little. They give themselves away. But then I've met, or really have met, a couple of people that I think can really see this stuff. Not in like the OBE realm, but like with their physical eyes, you know. So we may, for all practical purposes, consider the human makeup as consisting of a physical body of dense matter, which is subject to the known laws of chemistry, physics, and mechanics, a subtle body, obeying laws which appear analogous to what is known concerning electromagnetism and radioactivity, and a mental body, concerning which psychology has something to say, and could have a great deal more to say, if it were not as deaf as the scriptural adder to all those that do not fit in it with its materialistic viewpoint. I think she's pissed at Sigmund Freud there. And at the core of it all, a spiritual nucleus concerning which no one knows a great deal about, save that it is to the man with the grain of sand is to the pearl. The spiritual nucleus is apparently the channel for a limitless flow of force from the unmanifest, which, far from being the inert emptiness pictured by the untutored imagination, is the powerhouse of the whole manifested universe. So according to Dion Fortune, we all have this little pearl of the spark inside of us all. The other bodies, or vehicles, if the term be preferred, derive their pabulum from the basic substance of their respective planes in exactly the same manner as the physical body has its necessary intake of raw material in the form of food and drink. So it appears to me important from the practical point of view to distinguish between the intake of form building and maintaining substance on each plane, and the dynamic energy emanating from the great unmanifest and coming in through the channel afforded by the spiritual nucleus. I think I'm trying to understand this right here. I don't want to go through this too fast, but I'm trying to understand this. So the basic substance of their respective planes in exactly the same manner as the physical body has its necessary intake of raw material in the form of food and drink. So is she saying that? Okay. Because what we eat and what we take in, what we eat and drink, not only do they fuel us, they kind of create our bodies in the shape that they are. So I think she's saying that taking in the same energies do the same things to the other bodies, but it's not food or drink. It's whatever correlates to it, I guess. So it's important to distinguish between the intake of form building, there's some alchemy stuff in here too, and maintaining substance on each plane, and the dynamic energy emanating from the great unmanifest and coming in through the channel afforded by the spiritual nucleus. The exact nature of the spiritual nucleus and the nature of its relationship to the great unmanifest can only be a subject of speculation, but so far as I can see, what may be best be called the divine spark or unit of manifestation itself belongs to the plane of the unmanifest, and the spiritual body is its first formed vehicle of manifestation. I believe it. You know why I believe that is because Muldoon said the same thing. You gotta, like, this is how we find stuff in the void, right? We have to find people that are exploring consciousness in different aspects, but they're still saying the same things, and they may not even like each other. Like, the OBE spiritual guy or the mystic may not like the occultist. They're not reading each other's books, not as thoroughly as we would, and yet they're still talking about the same things, right? So the etheric double, I think what she just said right there is pretty important. I've said this a whole bunch, like who you are right now, you're actually your etheric double. The body is the car. If we took the etheric double out and you still had all the same electric energy, blood pumping, you'd just be a Frankenstein, but you wouldn't be able to consciously do anything. You'd just flop around, every time you got an electrical charge. You need that etheric double in there to do all this stuff. And I know what some neuroscientists would say, well, if you start removing parts of the brain, the body shuts down. Yeah, but the etheric double, the conscious person, I think that proves my point and her point even more. Like, the conscious being that wants to do these things can't, because it's not, like, it can't drive the car, obviously, if the car don't work. But that person's still there, So it is, I believe, very important to distinguish between the spiritual force, which supplies the energy of the whole being on all planes of existence, and the material for form building that has to be derived from each plane for the formation and upkeep of the vehicle of that plane. It is the failure to make this distinction which causes the prevailing uncertainty and inefficiency in manipulating the subtle aspects of our makeup. So we didn't get the memo about how to, feed our different subtle bodies. So hopefully she'll do that for us. It is as if we took no account on the physical plane of the presence or absence of life in the body and tried to feed a dead man, only to find ourselves much perplexed when, in spite of our best efforts, he began to decompose instead of putting on weight. Or if, contrawise, we thought it was unnecessary to supply a living person with food on the ground, that, being alive, he drew all the energy he required from his own vitality. So, long story short, she's saying the same thing with the other bodies, right? If you don't feed these other bodies, what's going to happen to them? How are you going to create a super conscious vehicle that you naturally are anyways, but you still have to feed them, just like you feed the body physical food to keep it going? So these are things we see done daily by the various schools of thought. And from the most materialistic to the most mystic, who can forget to take into account the exact working of the phrase, man cannot live by bread alone, forgetting that he cannot live without bread either. Fanatics of whatever type, whether materialistic or mystic, always appear to be people singularly lacking in common sense. It is also an odd fact that the term fanatic is reserved exclusively for application to the mystic and the idealist, entirely ignoring the fact that the materialist and the rationalist can exhibit exactly the same traits of emotionally determined bias and absence of good sense and balanced judgment. Yeah, that is kind of funny, though. Well, he's a fanatic, or she's a materialist, or that whatever. But, you know, if you carry on a conversation with both of them, they kind of, most of the time, they're just sound people, just different beliefs. So, bearing these points in mind, we see that it is not only possible theoretically, but vitally necessary for practical work to distinguish between the development by intensive training of the spiritual, the mental, the astral, and the vehicles of man. So we need to be training what? According to Dion Fortune, the spiritual body, the mental body, the astral body, and the physical body. Equally, we must bear in mind that they are all interacting, and we can no more develop one and ignore the others than we can cultivate the muscles while neglecting the corresponding development of the heart and lungs. An error that is made by many athletes, resulting in the premature death which is so often befalls them. Even more clearly do we see the same principle exemplified in the case of such men as Darwin, Herbert Spencer, and Carlyle, whose physical infirmities, which we now know to have been purely nervous in origin, greatly handicapped them in their work. Again, we see physically gifted people with such undeveloped mental vehicles that they were unable to avail themselves of their physical endowments. Each was entirely dependent on their respective managers and, left to their own devices, was helpless. We must now consider a point which is the key to the whole question of yoga and psychic development. Why is it that, by the culture of the etheric double, we can produce psychism and magical powers? How she says that with the quotations, magical powers. Why is it that by the culture of the etheric double, we can produce psychism and magical powers? A great deal of advice has been given as to how this task should be carried out, but very little thought has been devoted, or at any rate, very little has been published concerning the rationale of the proceeding, which consequently has been left on a rule of thumb basis. It is well known to those who study such matters that the etheric double, that subtle electrical counterpart of the physical body, is the link between mind and matter. Orthodox science knows something about its manifestations in relation to the central nervous system, but psychology is entirely innocent of any realization on that part it plays in sensory consciousness. It is the culture of this etheric double, the link between mind and body, that is affected by Hatha Yoga, with such remarkable results on both mind and body. Let it be carefully noted, moreover, that the results of such cultivation are neither merely physical or merely psychic, but concern the powers of the higher psychism as well, and lead on to genuine mystical experiences. So, if what she's saying is true, would this explain a lot of the chaos of OBE travelers? Think about it, right? Like, think about this. If you took your physical body into a professional football game, the ball gets kicked off. You're in the game. The ball gets kicked off. You run down the field. Man, you're going to get lit up like a pinball machine. It's going to be chaotic. It's going to feel like hell. Probably going to get hurt if it was me. But if your physical body's in shape, if you've trained for it, then you can handle it. It's the same thing in the OBE stuff. We first learn how to get out of body by just going through these like techniques, mind to sleep, or our body asleep, mind awake. And that's really all we do. And then we just kind of travel around and it's like, oh, what's next? That's really all we do. We explore consciousness that way. We just, I had this crazy chaotic experience, and then we start to take notes. And yet, like a lot of people that claim to be adepts or psychics or whatever, when you ask them, well, how are you training these energies? Well, I just naturally have this gift, and it's on 100% balanced all the time. Really? How is that possible? That doesn't even make sense energetically. So how you can tell usually is what she says, by the fruits of their labor, right? Just like anything else. So hopefully she'll get into training these 4 different bodies. But this all goes back to the traditional teachings and what all these different levels talk about. I think she's really on to something, because my main point, before I get too scatterbrained here, is this would definitely explain the massive chaos of the OBE realms. Go listen to the Monroe tapes, like those guys. Now, Robert Monroe would say, okay, this person has experience in, psychism or whatever, but other people were kind of just explorers. And if you listen to the different tapes, I'm not saying that, I'm not stating it as fact, but if you listen to all of them, you can tell, like, some of them are completely chaotic, which I find that easier to believe. Other ones you can tell when they're kind of making up their own stories. You get that feeling, and that's a feeling you should trust. But the chaos is something that we all endure, like in the void, all of us. Because I haven't met anybody personally. I might have met a couple of adepts in my life, but like, even if you take Chris's story, when his gifts started opening up at that temple or whatever, all of the chaos, like his body wasn't ready for that. His subtle bodies weren't ready for that. He ended up in the hospital and almost shooting a cop. And this is what she's talking about. But if we're not into any of that, not worried about those different bodies, and let's just say we're just dealing with the astral body, and we do the techniques to lay down and go to sleep and or travel out of body or whatever, 90% chance, if we're not training this astral body, or even asking, you can ask your higher, how do I train myself in this, or whatever. If we're not training this body, if we're just doing techniques to get out, and that there's no other spiritual purpose, we're going to spend 90% of our time in the astral realm dealing with a chaotic mess, in my opinion. So it is the culture of this etheric double, the link between mind and body, that is affected by Hatha Yoga. Damn. So it's well known to those who study such matters that the etheric double, the subtle electric counterpart of the physical body, is the link between mind and matter. Let it be carefully noted, moreover, that the results of such cultivation are neither merely physical nor merely psychic, but concern the powers of the higher psychism as well, and lead on to genuine mystical experiences, taking into consideration all that can be learnt, not only from tradition, but also from personal experimentation in its degree. It appears highly probable that the different levels of consciousness are correlated with the centers in the aura, recognized independently by the practical systems of both yoga and Kabbalah. And that's what she believes. And we can get into the psychic centers and stuff. We're at the top of the hour, though. This is Lighting the Void Radio Live here, April 16th, 2025. We got about 4 minutes here. Grab a drink. We'll be right back.
In your
doesn't it? Like, I wish some other earthling that's in this lost place that I'm in could give me the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It's not going to happen. Not until you're dead. Then you'll know. Then you can't tell anybody. And that's how it works. But we do have, in my personal experience, I think that what Dion Fortune here is talking about is legitimate at the very least, because I think this is a co-creative process. Now, she's about to get into the psychic centers. She wrote this in 1939. She's about to get into the psychic centers. So whether they're talking about the chakra systems of the East or the tree and the Kabbalistic tree of life, remember that this all could possibly be a co-creative thing. What I mean by that is maybe that whenever man decided to explore consciousness, I don't know, but a long time ago, I'm sure we've been doing this. We've been dreaming probably since humans were humans, lucid dreaming. And I'm probably sure a few people slipped out of body, even if they were like Cro-Magnon men or whatever. At some point, we started to try to understand what the hell was going on in these realms. And I think that, like, I don't personally believe, and I could totally be full of shit, I could be wrong. I just personally don't believe that some aliens came down and said, okay, here's the tree of life and here's these centers. I kind of think that maybe some men or women got really good at conscious exploring and possibly started mapping these things out, whether it's in the astral realm or in the human body. We started kind of mapping them out and then naming them. So in a way, we created a map. Just like when you explore a land, you start creating a map or tools on how to travel these realms. It doesn't mean that the tools themselves are ultimate reality. That's the way I look at it. So she goes on to say, we now come to the detailed consideration of the chakras or psychic centers and their practical use. The Indian yoga tradition undoubtedly enshrines the widest and profoundest knowledge available for the Kabbalistic teachings on the subject. As I learnt it, at any rate, is negligible. Learnt. The best course of this knowledge is to be found in the works of Arthur Avalon or Sir John Woodruff upon Tantra. That's some good stuff, too. You should read it. These books, however, are written in a very guarded manner so that the casual reader can glean little from them, and what he does obtain is profoundly misleading. I'm glad they stopped doing that stuff, though. Sir John Woodruff only defines his terms when using them in relation to purely metaphysical implications. But when using them in relation to practical psychic or magical matters, he leaves them untranslated. Consequently, that the student needs is a translation of Arthur Avalon's translation. So she goes on to say, this I had laboriously to equip myself with before I could make any headway, for a Sanskrit dictionary is no use in this connection. The tantric gurus, employing a kind of double entendre known only to the initiated, but Ahudabra has it. Patience and perseverance made a bishop of his reverence, and at the same made a yogi of me. I learned what I know by the dangerous method. Ooh, I like this. She goes, I learned what I know by the dangerous method of self-experiment, and more by good luck than good management. Survived to tell the tale despite all sinister prognostications. And the fruits of my experience, such as they are, I am prepared to give out in order that they may form the basis of future research. No doubt, my knowledge is limited and imperfect as compared with the Indian experts born and bred in the yoga tradition, but I am inclined to believe that it will prove to be of more practical use to Western students than any scholarly adherence to any traditional texts. For it is the fruit of actual experience of working in a Western body under Western conditions. My records are admittedly incomplete and imperfect, but so far as they go, they are personal and practical, and they will, I believe, form more efficient guideposts for the experiments of others, more than the more elaborately documented, but more abstract and doctrinaire genre. So it will certainly be said, and not without justice, by the orthodox exponents of the art, but this is not yoga, to which I reply, I never said it was. It is my own recipe. See what and I didn't pre-read this, right? You see what she just did? She took what she learned, explored consciousness on her own, came up with her own recipe using maps that other people have used before. I'm telling you guys, like, this is the key to all of it. You can use, I think Chaos and Magicians kind of have this down, right? Like, you can use egregores, maps, any kind of tool you want to use to explore consciousness. You can use psychedelics or whatever, but at the end of the day, if you're looking to another person to give you answers on your consciousness, your experience, who you are, all these mysteries and stuff, you're messing up, I think. All we can get is just tools. That's it, to explore this ourselves. We can come back and talk about it, but I think we're doing a bigger disservice if we start saying, well, this is the truth and this is the way it is and these are the levels of consciousness and this is what all this really means. Like, I think because people want to know this stuff so much, it's easy to lean on anybody that can, like, talk about this stuff as if they know it, because people really want to know. And I think that is a problem. So I'm glad that she said that. I never said it was. It's my own recipe, compounded from the works of Sir John Woodruff on Tantra, Madam, I guess, what is that? David Neal on Tibetan mysticism, and Boudin and autosuggestion, and the Kabbalistic method of the middle pillar as I learned it in the Order of the Golden Dawn. So those who want to study this latter will find it exposed in the works of the able renegade Israel Regardie. The Kabbalists accustomed to using the middle pillar will find it necessary to make careful distinction between his Malkuth and Yesod and the yogis, Muladhara and Swadhisthana chakras. The yogi locates both these in the auric equivalent of the pelvic region of the spine. The Kabbalist locates Yesod, or the moon center, there, but places Malkuth under the feet in the same way as Kether is over the head, thus indicating that it likewise is a link with objectivity. So in the Kabbalistic method, Malkuth is used as an earth contact. Why is my phone blowing up right now? Okay. Malkuth is used as the earth contact, and the operator visualizes himself standing on it as if it were the globe of the earth swinging through space, and a remarkable magnetic flow is thus received. This current, derived according to the tradition from the earth's aura, rises straight to Yesod in the sacral plexus, you know where that is, and there becomes personal to the individual. Yesod, in fact, is a transformer of the universal elementary energy into personal magnetism. And this is a very important practical point. Therefore, although it is customary to equate Malkuth with the Muladhara lotus, and I have done this myself in previous writings, and I have come after practical experience of both methods to doubt whether this is correct. But it must be remembered in equating the lotuses with the Sephiroth, that the yoga method is concerned with the single line of centers arranged one above the other, and the Kabbalistic method is concerned with 3 lines of centers related to each other in triangles, and we must consider the functions rather than the locations of the centers in equating them. Hopefully you guys know where this is, right? And if you, so, okay, I'm sure a lot of you know where the Eastern chakras are, right? But in the tree of life, Malkuth is located at the feet, Yesod around the sexual centers or organs, okay? And then Tiferet in the heart. And then it just goes up from there. So Malkuth occupies a position in the aura analogous to that of Kether. That is to say, it is outside the body and has no physical analog. And just as Kether picks up from the cosmic forces, so Malkuth picks up from the earth's magnetism. Kether, therefore, which is the light above the head, equates accurately with the Sahasrara lotus. But the function and feel of Malkuth is quite different to that of the Muladhara. Moreover, the coloring is different. Malkuth has attributed it to the 4 colors of the elements or elemental earth, whereas the Muladhara is wine-colored. Yesod, on the other hand, has among its colors in the 4 color scales, indigo, very dark purple, and violet purple, and the paths surrounding it have various shades of crimson, dark blue, and wine color among their symbolism. It is pretty similar when you look at the systems too. So in my own experience, moreover, I've found that what is said of the Muladhara lotus to equate with my experience of Yesod, which for practical working purpose is unquestionably the reservoir of magnetic force so far as the individual is concerned. Traditionalists will not agree with this, but I was aware of the workings of Yesod before I had ever heard of yoga, and the results I obtained from that center exactly equate with what is reported of the Muladhara and its sleeping serpent. So I guess what she's saying is in the Western tree of life, you can't really equate with like Earth, Malkuth, and the Muladhara, but you can equate the Muladhara with Yesod, which is more around the sexual centers or the sacral. So an ounce of, the base of the spine too. So an ounce of experience is worth several pounds of tradition and the citing of authorities who copy one from another. And in taking my own experience in conjunction with the traditional colorings of Yesod and its converging paths, I think we here have a useful indication of this working. There are certain places on the tree where the paths connecting the pairs of opposites or the equilibrating Sephiroth on the side pillars cut the middle pillar. And these nodes are obviously important points. I believe we shall be on the right track if we equate certain of the chakras with these nodes and recognize in them the equilibrated forces of the pairs of opposites of the different levels of manifestation. The Svadhisthana lotus, according to this system of notation, would correlate with the equilibrium of Hod and Netzach. You guys even know where this stuff is? Because I've talked about it a million times. And as soon as you start talking about the tree of life, people are like, you know. So let me see. I don't know if I have a tree of life. I have one here. Maybe I can. I feel like if I start drawing stuff, though, it's just going to confuse people. So let me get this. Let me get this. All right. So what she's talking about right now. So this is the sphere. Wait, how do I? Oh, I'm on the wrong thing here. I hate doing this. So this is Netzach, and this is Hod. These two spheres. So she's saying that that's where that is. If you put the tree and the chakras together, that's where that would be. The Svadhisthana lotus. So it would really be on like this whole plane right here. That line right there. Those two forces. Because remember, she was trained in Western occultism, was all based on the tree of life, right? Now, Hod, Netzach, and Yesod are called the magical triangle. Hod, equating with Thoth Hermes, is characterized by an intellectual, Hod is the orange one, is characterized by an intellectual, austere method of operation of the Hermetic type. Netzach, the green one, equating with Aphrodite and the Lady of Nature, is characterized by the Greek type of magic, and such is seen in the Dionysian rites, and Yesod, the purple one, equating with the moon, which according to the most ancient tradition is the magnetic aspect of the earth, is characteristically represented by the magical methods of Egypt. So what she's saying is in these energetic spheres, all of these magic. I'm going to see if I can do circles here. So this would be like equated with, this sphere would be equated with like Hermes, Thoth, I guess. And that's what she's saying. And then the green sphere would be created with like Greek magic, Aphrodite, Dionysian, right? And then the purple sphere would be equated with which is Yesod, the moon sphere, which would be equated with all of like the Egyptian magic. And this all kind of corresponds to one, according to her, to one of the chakras. They also keep in mind too that like this sphere, the one in the middle, okay, it goes from earth. You could say Malkuth, Yesod, Tiferet, Kether, this pillar. But from bottom to top, it's Malkuth, Yesod, Tiferet, Kether, which is more like saying earth, moon, sun, and then you could say stars, or so the earth would be the four-colored one, the moon, the purple one, the sun, the yellow one, and then Kether at the very top would be like God or consciousness or whatever. Let me see if I can erase this. Doing this on the fly too, so sorry. I'm sure I'm just trying to, all right, kind of interpret what she's saying here. All right, so according to Madame Blavatsky's secret doctrine, the moon is the reservoir of magnetic force for the earth because evolution was at the etheric phase of development when moon and earth parted company. I don't know if you guys have read her book, The Secret Doctrine, but it's a wild book. Now, if this is true, and I attribute high authority to the secret doctrine, then it is to be presumed that what Kabbalists call the moon center in the microcosm will fulfill the same function, that is to say, Yesod will be the reservoir of magnetic force at the base of the spine where the serpent Kundalini, which possibly equates with the Kabbalistic dragon, which sleeps in her coils. So again, we're talking about this sphere here, okay? This dadgummit, we're talking about this sphere, the purple one. Now, when you put the body against that sphere, you're going to see it's going to be located around the sexual kind of organs. But it also relates to many other things, the moon, the subconscious, things like that, which is kind of, it all makes sense if you really dig into it. Wow, thanks, Sudi, for the $14.99. Love you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so it'll be remembered by Kabbalists that it is in Yesod that is the place of the severest judgments, to which Leviathan raises its 7 crowned heads, and allowing for the aesthetic influence of Christian thought upon the doctrine of Western initiates. It is quite probable that the goddess Kundalini of the East is referred to as that old serpent in the Bible, and here again we have a useful piece of information. I do not believe that the magnetic circuits in the aura are normally closed circuits at all, but the real secret of certain types of yoga lies in knowing how to pick up the different types of force at the different levels from sources outside ourselves. At any rate, whatever the pupils of Eastern gurus may be taught to do, the Kabbalist is accustomed to pick up the earth currents through his Malkuth, and that is true. She's saying that the currents reside in this purple sphere, okay? That's where all of the force lies dormant, in that sphere, and, you know, as that relates to that triangle and that one chakra in the east. But when you read the books, you're going to hear, it's going to seem as if everything's coming from Malkuth, which is down there. That's how they write about it in the books. But these two things are more connected. These two spheres, the earth sphere of Malkuth and Yesod, are far more connected than they lead on in the beginning at first. So you could say that, I don't want to make it too complicated, but you could say in Yesod is kind of a blueprint of what becomes manifest. It's the final kind of blueprint. All right, so at any rate, whatever the pupils of Eastern gurus may be taught to do, the Kabbalist is accustomed to pick up the currents through Malkuth, and in the middle pillar, and even the audios that I have, it starts in the feet, and that's perfectly fine. But you kind of need to know where the energy actually lies dormant, though. So that's okay. The elemental energy which feeds the etheric double is picked up from the earth aura through Malkuth center, just as definitely as the food that feeds the physical body is taken in by the mouth. There is a widespread belief that it is picked up from the physical earth by the soles of the feet. People do this all the time. They take their shoes off, they go outside to get grounded. And people refuse to wear rubber soles on their boots because they believe that to do so insulates them from the earth's magnetism. Now, such beliefs are superstitions due to the error of confusing the planes. Aura picks up from aura, and because for practical purposes the aura follows the conformation of the physical body. It is convenient to assume physical postures and make physical gestures because the body carries the aura with it. It is not the physical form that is doing the work, which can be done quite independently of physical acts when the imagination, check this out, when the imagination is sufficiently trained to be able to visualize the aura without adventitious aids. The inhibiting effect, do you know what an adventitious aid is? Think about that. Think about things like magical tools, all kinds of different things. When you really go through that whole training, you start to empower the imagination, and then later you don't really need it. Which, when I say that, makes most people go, yeah, I don't need it. But yeah, you do. You don't, you should train all that stuff first. The inhibiting effect of rubber soles is simply due to the fact that what we picture in the imagination, we build in the astral kingdom. So we make the blueprint real because we believe it. And if we imagine a barrier to exist, that barrier comes into being. Let's tell this tree up, man. Okay. I'll pull it back up if we need it, but this is what I mean by co-creative, like how we create things. If what we believe comes to pass, I mean, not something that we think we believe. If we really believe something, it creates a blueprint in the astral and eventually manifests into the physical and in our reality. And there's a psychological aspect to that too. But anyways, so this is another important key to the practical workings. It may, of course, be said that such activities are pure autosuggestion, but the initiate believes them to be something more than that. He believes that the subtle levels of the human makeup can enter into relationship with the corresponding levels of objective existence, and so extend the range of our experience and function beyond the physical body. Initiates, though under no delusions concerning the part played by physical agencies in such matters, nevertheless make use of the physical forms of the elemental energies when seeking to contact the Earth's magnetism. Now, such an act, the reason why it's powerful isn't the fact that our feet are touching the ground, so much as it is ritualistic rather than of the nature of physical exercise. It is the mental effect of the physical action that counts, not just the action. So when we put our feet on the ground, yeah, we believe we're drawing up this energy, and we are, because we believe it. The fact that our feet are touching the ground, that it stimulates the senses of our touch, right? Which even expounds upon our belief even more. And it's the actual earth causes it to happen, right? And you can hear people, they say it all the time. I do grounding exercises. I just take my shoes off and go outside and I feel the grass. And it works. Nevertheless, because places tune mood, it is well worthwhile seeking the elemental contacts and to seek them where the elements are present in their strength, which is, the earth. By so doing, we not only aid ourselves in the establishment of contacts, but may enjoy experiences of great interest and value. But although the beginner needs all the help that physical conditions can give him, the experienced worker ought to be independent of them. It is the very amateur and precious author who has to have something special in the way of a desk or an ink pot to enable him to function. All the experienced writer requires is pen and paper and a quiet corner. So it's my experience that we ought to be very careful to balance the subjective and objective in our occult work, and not only allow ourselves to become exclusively habituated to either in our methods of working. If we do, we produce a one-sided development and may make of ourselves dissociated introverts, cut off from the world of form. And please, I love void walking to death, but I can tell you from experience, being disconnected for years at a time, without any actual worldly connections, it's going to cause stress in your body, and stress is what kills you. So don't, unless you just love being alone all the time, don't cut yourself off from the world too much. You need contact. Otherwise, you would have been put on a planet all by yourself, So they make ourselves dissociated introverts, cut off from the world of form just as effectually and limitingly as the worldly man is cut off from spiritual things. Yeah, everything's balanced. I'm not just talking about people, too. I've done this, man. When I first started this broadcast, I'm not playing. The most that I did, I would just podcast and record. So I would work here. I would work in the shack. I'd do the daily stuff, eat, sleep, whatever, walk down the road a little bit, do the normal human, but I didn't do anything. And there was a certain stress that it always caused me. So when the show got to a point to where I started making friends and talking to people and having to travel and stuff, I'm not going to lie to you, man. I was so stressed about the dumbest things, just things where just basic contact or social gatherings, things like that were causing me anxiety because I'd cut myself off completely from all that. And it's not just people. I mean, some people I know just want to stay asleep and dream walk all the time. That's bad too. It's not bad. It's just out of balance. I hate to even call it bad. So in this matter, we shall be unwise to allow the advice and example of the saints of the West and the yogis of the East to influence us unduly. For many things pass that's spiritual that are really just pathological. Remember that. Many things pass for spiritual stuff that's really just pathological. And I shall always maintain that there is little profit in saving the soul at the expense of the mental balance. 100%. So it is this difference in viewpoint and divergence in aim between East and West which forces us to approach the practice of yoga by the traditional methods with great caution. And for this reason, I prefer to apply the theory of yoga to the practice of the Kabbalistic methods rather than pursue wholeheartedly an imperfectly understood and alien method. Yeah. So she's sticking to her guns. She's sticking to the tree. Man, I haven't seen anything. What's up? Tattooed? What? I was taking a Kalswar guy many years ago. I said to him that I don't want a necklace, a mantra, or whatever. He said to me, would I rather rake a yard of leaves by hand or with a tool? That's a good point, I guess. But he could just be trying to sell you stuff too, I don't know. So here we go. The Earth and the Moon centers. We'll start with the most important ones. You could say too, like if you're looking at this just in OBE terms, you could say, okay, the physical, I guess the thing closest to the physical world and the thing that's closest to the subconscious and sexual forces. Same difference, I think, in my opinion. So for practical purposes of the Kabbalah-trained Western initiate is accustomed to pick up the earth forces through his Malkuth, located under the soles of the feet, and to regard of the sacral or pelvic centers as, you know what, would it help if I put a stick man here? Because I'm saying names of stuff and you don't even know what I'm talking about, right? Like, can you do a stick man on the Tree of Life? I don't know. I'm going to try to do a stick man. Let's do a stick man. Call this Joe's stick man. There's the head. Let's do that. Let's make the feet with lines, I guess. Or let's just make the stick. Some of y'all are going to laugh, probably. Whatever, who cares? Stick man. Right arm, left arm. There we go. There's the stick man. All right. All right. So Malkuth is located under the soles of the feet and to regard the sacral or pelvic centers as constituting as Yesod. That's the purple one. The moon sphere of personal magnetism. And this appears to be a useful, practical concept. Now, working with microcosmic Malkuth, we contact the elemental forces, and working with the microcosmic Yesod, we contact our own reserves of magnetism and set them in motion. Malkuth, the earth sphere at the bottom, as we have already seen, is charged from the earth aura, but whence does Yesod receive its magnetism? So this raises an important point. So if the energies are coming from the earth, when does the Assad receive its magnetism? So this raises, the purple one, this raises an important point, and one that needs to be carefully examined and thoroughly understood, for it is here we have the possibilities of both power under chaos. We have to face the all-important matter of the real nature and function of the moon center, the fact that it is correlated with the sacral plexus in both Eastern and Western systems should have put investigators on the track of its real nature. For the sacral nerve plexus controls the generative organs, your sex organs, right? In the moon center, the impersonal magnetic vitality derived from the earth is transformed into very personal sex force. And if anybody questions that statement, I suggest they put it to the test of practical experiment and see for themselves. It is well known to all students of the subject who have penetrated below the surface that sex plays a very important part in Hatha Yoga, and as Hatha Yoga is the basis of all the other forms of yoga and has to be mastered before they are attempted. So it's obvious that we have here one and possibly the chief of the secret keys which are perpetually being hinted about but never really explained. The fact that the Eastern and Western views on the subject of sex are widely sundered is probably the good and sufficient reason why this mystery is not explained to the European inquirer. The guru fears that if he were too explicit, he would lose his students. Nevertheless, allowing for the difference of viewpoint and social conditions, it can be explained rationally and I hope without offense. I don't care if it offends, I just want the truth. It is because this is not done that so much trouble results from the practice of yoga by Europeans and Westerners, because we don't get a solid explanation, she says. It's very necessary to know these things if the student of yoga is to be pursued with safety, let alone efficiency. The key to the whole of the practical working really lies in the fact that the force of the moon center is carried up to the higher centers and they're utilized for purposes appropriate to those centers. In other words, we have an example of the principle which Western psychology is familiar with under the name of sublimation. So in the practical workings, we pick up elemental forces from the earth through the earth center. We transmute it into magnetic force through the moon center, and we raise it again to the sun center where the actual work begins. If we fail to maintain thought control when the force is at the moon level, sexual images will arise in the imagination and the force will short circuit through sensual channels. If, however, we maintain a rigid control, which we can only do if we are experts in the practice of concentration, then the force rises out of the sexual sphere and gives no more trouble in that direction, but becomes available for the purposes of higher magic. Now, listen to me very carefully, okay? I want you guys to listen to this part very carefully. When Robert Monroe, now she's talking about, before I go to the OBE travelers, so she's talking about this force, okay, that comes from the earth, from our feet, up to our sexual organs. If we do it properly, we transmute it, and I'm drawing an arrow here. We transmute it up to the sun, and it just keeps going higher. And then we can expend it out into different parts and all kinds of different things like that. But it goes up the middle pillar, so to speak. When Robert Monroe was traveling out of body, do you remember once he started getting so far, what happened? He ran into, and always did from then on out, a sexual level of things. Now, why is that? How could these two people that don't know each other talking about two different things in two different ways? One is experiencing when I go out of body and I go into the astral realm, I get to this one level and there's all of these energies trying to have sexual intercourse with me in an astral sense of the word. But he learned how to transmute it eventually. What did he do? He said, I had to figure out how to get past it because I couldn't get past it. The force was so overwhelming that I couldn't get past it. And in his books, he figured out how to do it. So what he did is he held off, right? He told whatever, I guess you could call it a woman, whatever, opposite force in the astral realm, I would love to merge with you, and we can do that later. Matter of fact, he would promise it. We'll do it later. I have to go do this one thing. And he said that he figured that out by some country song that he heard about some woman that was always wanting to give him a kiss or whatever. And he said, I'll definitely, I really want to kiss you, but I have to take care of this one thing first, or whatever. The whole point is he learned a method of I don't know if I would call that transmutation, but he was kind of doing the same things that the occultists are teaching about in his astral form. He was learning it's not bad to give into it. That's not the point. The point is he learned how to get through it. Now, I don't know if that would be considered transmutation, but he did kind of deflect the energy. Anyways, back to what she's saying. If we maintain thought control when the force is at the moon level or the astral level, or, sexual images will arise in the imagination, kind of like they showed up in Robert Monroe's Astral Travels, and the force will short circuit through sensual channels. Now, if we maintain a rigid control, which we can only do if we have really good concentration, then the force rises out of the sexual sphere and gives no more trouble in that direction, but becomes available for the purposes of higher magic. And if you think about Monroe, he went to higher places in the astral realm. Now, without the basis of personal magnetic force, I do not believe it is possible to work magic effectually. It is because in the West, we are both ignorant and afraid of this, that our magic is inefficient and our occultists of ill repute, for either they fail to function at all or fall into pits that they have all unknowingly digged. But in my opinion, we ought to understand these powers and keep them clean, neither refusing to face them nor basely exploiting them. Now, keep in mind the distinction I have made between the Kabbalistic Malkuth and the Muladhara lotus of Hatha Yoga, with which it is usually equated. We are now in a position to study the nature of Yesod by equating it with the Muladhara. And to avoid confusion, I will refer to this Yesod Muladhara equation as the sacral center. Let me erase. Well, I don't need to erase anything. I still got the stick man. So, but she's still kind of basically talking about this sphere here. Damn it. Or maybe it's bigger. Maybe it's the whole triangle. I don't know. We're going to read it and find out. But I think it's this area here. Big old circle. We'll narrow it down in a second. So the Muladhara lotus is usually described as a reservoir within the aura where magnetic force is stored in the form that is called the sleeping serpent or the kundalini. And with all due respect to the learned traditionalists, I believe this explanation to be lacking in certain vital particulars. For it's my experience that the Kabbalistic teaching is better upon this point when it says that in normal circumstances, vital force is picked up from the earth and not stored in the aura. So far as I can see, the aura is the channel of an alternating current that flashes from heaven to earth and back again. The methods of Hatha Yoga aim at transforming this alternating current into a circuit in which the individual, by insulating himself from the earth, prevents the earthing of the magnetic force and turns himself into a storage battery, like in the Matrix. You're a battery. Thus raising the magnetic voltage of his own aura. Now, these analogies are crude and should be regarded as metaphoric, not descriptive, but it's a far better understanding that can be arrived at by those untrained in the discipline of philosophy if we employ analogies rather than attempt to expound the subtleties of metaphysics. So it's well worth our while to borrow these terminologies of electricity, whatever the pursuits may be able to allege against these methods. So she just said a whole bunch of stuff saying we're going to treat this like electricity, basically. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's electricity. So you got, let me erase this big circle here. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. Anyways, you know where the stick man is, right? So you got this force, this alternating, I guess you could say alternating force between earth and heaven, right? And it alternates up and down the spine, up and down the earth to heaven, etc., that kind of thing. So when you hear her say microcosmic, she's probably talking about the body or the how the energies relate to things on earth or the human body. And macrocosmic, it's more of the creative, the higher spheres, but it's all, spheres. But anyways, this middle pillar is what she's talking about, from heaven to earth to heaven, and that this kind of force never stops flowing. Now, I don't have it much to draw with, but you can draw it any way you want, front to back, left to right, whatever. Just it goes back. You could do a figure eight. I would prefer a figure eight, but it works together. It's not separate. It just works together, and this energy goes back and forth between it. So we're borrowing from electricity terms. So it will be seen from what has gone before in these pages that the tree of life represents the magnetic configuration of the natural man, whereas the lotus diagram of the Hatha Yoga represents the magnetic configuration of the magician. When therefore the Kabbalah-trained Western student tries to adapt the methods of Hatha Yoga to his own system, he must remember to cut out Malkuth, and by this thus insulating his earth contact, render himself a storage battery. So did she just say, let me make sure that I'm reading this right. So the lotus diagram of the Hatha Yoga represents the magnetic configuration of the magician. So if you're a Kabbalah-trained Western student and you want to adapt the methods of Hatha Yoga, you must remember to cut out Malkuth, by thus insulating the earth contact. Render yourself a storage battery. This being done, he applies to Yesod what is said of the Muladhara lotus. And now the system becomes workable. So what she's saying here is, if you cut out Malkuth, so we're going to take out this, like if you want to switch systems or whatever, we're going to take out this earth sphere down here. We're going to cut that out. We're just going to cut that bottom part out. And now if you read books about yoga, and when they're talking about that center, they're actually talking about the Yesod, the storage battery here, which is basically our sacral or sexual centers, right, at the bottom there. Okay. And it renders himself a storage battery. This being done, he applies to Yesod what is said of the Muladhara lotus, and the system becomes workable, which before would be misleading. In confirmation of this, let me remind the Kabbalists among my readers that Yesod is referred to in the Sefer Yetzirah as the receptacle, wherein all forces are gathered together, the purple sphere there. And this description accurately fits the Muladhara lotus with its coiled serpent, the sleeping kundalini. Now, let us consider what happens when we cut out Malkuth and the earth contacts and turn ourselves into a storage battery. One of two things must happen. Either we depend entirely on the spiritual forces received through Kether, which is the very top sphere, or we establish a new circuit via Yesod. A little consideration of the respective natures of Kether and Yesod will reveal to us practical implication of these two procedures. If we cut our so what she's saying is, if you want to work that system, then you'll be going from battery to heaven, battery to heaven. This is kind of why, like when you read the books, when they start developing the trees and the systems, it's like, well, the tree looks like this. No, it's got this. It's because these people are actually exploring this stuff, consciously getting out of body, occultists, whatever. And this is the stuff they're experiencing. So this is how they've mapped it out. If we cut ourselves off from the earth contacts, we will soon find ourselves beginning to reabsorb into the plane of spirit. Now, this is the, this is the well-known aim of Raha Yoga and its discipline, both mental and physical, is designed with this end in views, as in fact are all aesthetic disciplines that repudiate the world and the flesh. The alternative method, which works the Yesod circuit, is known as Tantric, or to the Tantric text, we must go in order to learn what this means. Tantric magic is a method of exceedingly ill repute and can unquestionably lead to the grossest moral abuses. Now, on the other hand, to the aesthetic ideal, it can be traced that the vast mass of nervous and mental trouble which is due to sexual repression. This is why either too much repression is bad and too much, I guess you could say, promiscuity can lead to an out of balance energy. And you don't have to like study magic to know this. If you're just into the OBE stuff, you can kind of see the same thing. Imagine if you was going out of body and you finally worked your way to this kind of Yesod sphere, or this sphere that Robert Monroe, he doesn't even call it that, but this sexual level, and all you're doing is just, melding with people all the time. That's all you do. And you never go anywhere, right? And then when people have like open Kundalini experiences, whether it's accidental or whatever, a lot of times you'll hear that they go crazy. They have psychological problems too, because the middle pillar isn't healthily connected in a balanced sense of the word. So we have therefore to steer between one or the other in this matter, remembering that because it's dangerous, it's not necessarily a haven of refuge. I don't know what she's talking about there, but in judging tantric methods, we must bear certain things in mind, that if we are to form an adequate opinion, we must not take the missionary's viewpoint, reinforced by the lurid revelations of sensational travel books, as being an impartial presentation of the subject as a whole. Modern scholarship has shown that the views of the early fathers on the pagan civilization of their day were very far from a fair presentation of the facts. And since, though manners change, human nature does not, it may quite well be that the missionaries may have failed to appreciate the significance of a system so widely different in viewpoint from their own. As for the sensation mongers among the travelers, we must remember that pornography dishes up as ethnology, as always sure of a public, and that India caters in exactly the same manner as Montmartre for tourists who wish to be shocked. And she's talking about stuff, I guess, where people do this kind of stuff. They travel and do it. I got to look into this before I can tell you about it more. Serious ethologists are beginning to give us data apart from moralizing. And if to this data we apply the teachings of psychoanalysis, we realize that we are dealing with people who see no evil in sex and act accordingly, and though taking a serious view of marriage. Now, from them we may learn much that is of a very great value. So they don't see sex as evil, and they explore these energies healthily, but they also take a very serious viewpoint of marriage, the sacred side of it. And so what Dion Fortune is saying here is that from them we may learn much of what is a great value, and that serves as a much needed corrective for neurotic Europeans. The Tantra, the Kabbalah, and Freudian psychoanalysis forms a trinity in unity, which is the key that not only admits to the mystery, I'm going to tell you guys right now, what she's about to say right here in this next sentence, in my opinion, and what I've been trying to say to people for a long time, I think I finally found a good phrase to explain this, is going to explain a lot of the hidden stuff here, okay? Tantra, the Kabbalah, and Freudian psychoanalysis forms a trinity in unity, which is the key that not only admits to the mystery temple, but releases from the lunatic asylum. It's the key to the mysteries, Tantra, the Kabbalah, and Freudian psychoanalysis, according to her. But it's the key to the mysteries, but also keeps it where you learn it in a balanced way, learn all three of them, what's really going on there, okay? Consciously, subconsciously, sexually, energetically. And that is the deepest secret of alchemy, is that transmutation of the energy that happens to you, right? And it happens on all levels. But this may seem a hard saying and is hardly likely to be popular, but it is likewise very quotable, and if lifted from its context, very damaging. In other words, if you don't read this in context, it's damaging. But I believe it to be the truth. This is Dion Fortune saying this. And truth is a thing of which I have a very high opinion, though no doubt Mark Twain is right from the worldly point of view, that when he says that as truth is so rare and precious, we ought to use it very economically. Truth, alas, partakes more of the nature of a high explosive than a negotiable commodity. And if you want my opinion on what, quote, truth is, the best thing to do is listen to others, right? And listen to your intuition and what you're learning and explore this stuff, because you can't really learn the truth till you stop telling everybody your truth. You just can't. So I think that's a really, really good quote right there. The Tantra, the Kabbalah, and Freudian psychoanalysis form a trinity and unity, which is the key that not only admits to the mystery temple, but releases it from the lunatic asylum. Because when you study this stuff at its deepest level, you can see that a lot of people have their opinions about the occult side of things. I'm not talking about the OBE side of things, although I have heard that Robert Monroe's books are nothing but like sexual books or whatever from a few people, but I don't believe that at all. But if you, how do I say this? If you study what happens to the occultists as they learn the mysteries on a depth level, like as what they experience and what they're trying to learn and all this other stuff, and then you read Robert Monroe's, you can read all 3 books. You'll see kind of the same processes of energy that's happening to both. They call it different things. It happens in different ways. In my opinion, the OBE world is cooler, really cooler, but way more chaotic. And the occult world is more systematic, a little bit more boring, but still the same process is happening, right? If you really study those 3 things you just talked about, the Tantra, the Kabbalah, and Freudian psychoanalysis, and I would say Jungian psychoanalysis too, because I don't think, I could be wrong, but during this time, I think Jungian kind of cracked Freudian stuff, but Freudian's, it's important. If you study these 3 things, I think it's something that we've learned as a society to map out the mysteries of this energetic process. That means what I'm saying is the methods of Tantra, when you point at it, that's not ultimate reality or truth. Neither is the Kabbalah, and neither is either is the psychoanalysis stuff. But they are tools that we've co-created together through all these individual teachers and collectively to explore this energy. And that might be the key to really becoming, quote, enlightened, so to speak, you know. And I think she doesn't get into too much more detail about the centers, because the next thing is like they start talking about the serpent power and the serpentine force, and Gareth Knight kind of gets into it. But yeah, like if you study the stuff and listen to Monroe's books, I think, I could be wrong, but you'll start to pick up on the same things that I'm picking up on here. All right. Anyways, it's the top of the hour. We got to get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow night. I appreciate you guys coming out. Thanks, Sudi, for the $14.99. You're the best. I appreciate you. Love you. All that stuff. And yeah, we'll be back tomorrow night. Good night, y'all. Sweet dreams. Thanks for your support.
Here we are now, a little bit after the middle.
We're searching far for something, but we've got no idea what it is.
On this distracted earth, sucked dry by the vampires of finance, the world of man and of so-called culture grins back at us.
Periodically it may shift and go into some other directions, but one of the main things we'll try to demonstrate is
you can build humanity, you can build a beautiful society,